Well, some really confusing numbers in there too, I've got to say, Danica. And I just noted on social media, the health editor for the Sydney Morning Herald pointed out that if Sydney was on this roadmap, it would only be on step 2 that there'd be a curfew in Sydney and people restricted to within 5 k's of their home. And we know, as Peter said, that contact tracing has been very efficient under the Berejiklian government. And so it gives you a sense of the anomalies here in terms of this roadmap. In terms of the broader sense of where we are here, you've got businesses told 6-week lockdown. Now it's basically those same businesses being told another 6 weeks with very little information. And already we've seen that respected business representative, AIG Chief Executive Innes Willox, he is absolutely flabbergasted this afternoon. He said, rather than providing the hope and optimism required, along with clear and measurable steps for businesses to open up, today's announcement will only prolong the economic and social pain that all Victorians are feeling. There will be catastrophic economic, health and social damage caused by the continued lockdown and prospect of more months of sharply diminished activity. Businesses employing hundreds of thousands of Victorians that had operated safely for months will needlessly remain shuttered for an indefinite period. That's from Innes Willox. As I say, very respected business representative, the AIG chief executive, and fundamentally, he is bewildered at the lack of consultation that has been afforded the business community. And quite frankly, I think, and it's not just business, it's more broadly. I know Peter knows this better than I do in being in Canberra, but speaking to loved ones who live in Melbourne right now, they could do with a bit of a sense of hope.
It was interesting.
It's bleak.
Peter as well, the Premier there said that he's disappointed himself that he can't open things up quicker. Do you have any empathy for him?
He is, look, I'll be very blunt on his political tactics. So he takes questions, he doesn't answer them. When he gets in a tough spot, he says to every journalist who's asking the questions, absolutely come back to you, come back to you. That woman I mentioned before from The Age said, well, I've been asking this question for weeks now. This is on contact tracing. I've been backwards and forwards to your office. I haven't been given the information. He pushes it off. And when he gets in a tough bind, he goes to either blaming Victorians or I understand your pain. I live in, grew up in country Victoria, he says, or I haven't seen his mum. Well, I haven't seen my mum either. Most Victorians haven't seen their parents. I'm a Victorian that's got lives in Melbourne, obviously, but a lot of family in country Victoria. I can't see any circumstance in the paperwork out today that I will be able to see friends and family outside Melbourne, well, even friends and family inside other Melbourne suburbs before the end of the year, but let alone family in country Victoria. He's dividing Victorians. He has no demonstrable plan. I mean, Kieran's point there, picked up by the Sydney Morning Herald that he mentioned there at the top, that if these rules were applied to Sydney, Sydney would be locked down like we are in Victoria. Absolutely right. I mean, Sydney had 10 new cases today, and the threshold for us to get away from curfews in this 5-kilometre rule, which, he says will happen at the end of September, is that we start to come down in those sorts of numbers. We're not going to get there. Nowhere in the world has 5 cases or less per day over a 14-day period. Show me the country in the world that has that sort of number, and I will then say, OK, fair enough, I can see some light at the end of the tunnel. But there was no plan today for any of that. There was no hope today, and I really, really have to underscore, I mean, I lived through the pyramid crisis, the collapse of the State Bank here in Victoria, the recession in the 1990s. It was my first years of university. If you thought Victoria was bleak and dark and tough back then, this will be that by a magnitude. By a magnitude. I mean, this will be destroying the businesses and the restaurant culture, the bars, the live music, the big scale events, all the things that Melbourne has built up for decades. And it all goes back to the sheer and utter bloody incompetence of this government. I mean, I'm angry, Victorians are angry, even my Labor mates are furious at the position Victoria is in, because this was foreseeable and avoidable. and we don't get any sense that the bloke and his government know how to get out of this mess now.